I call David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and it was very helpful hearing some comments from the Minister, but albeit I'm going to disagree with much of what she's had to say. I'd just like to refer back firstly to some comments made by Carmel Sepuloni. She talked about one of the, and while acknowledging Labor's serious reservations about this legislation, she suggested the bill, the register, might give people some sense of security. In fact, so I would argue that would be a false sense of security, given the sad reality is that most offending of this sort, most offending against children, is perpetrated by people known to them. I think I've recently seen evidence that this whole program around stranger danger we used to run in schools is to be abandoned, because that gives people the sense that the problem is somewhere out there, that it's external, somebody hiding in the bushes or behind the bus shelter. The reality is, sadly, that much of this child sex offending is perpetrated by people known to them. Therefore, the publishing of a list of names, whatever one calls it, really doesn't contribute much to resolving that problem. We've heard very strong arguments why this register ought never to be public. That rather graphic example, a fellow who'd come out the other side was working, contributing to his community, having his house torched because somebody discovered he had been a sex offender. It is almost inevitable that this register will leak. If you look at the list of agencies who will have access to it, the number of people working within those agencies, it is inevitable that there will be literally thousands of people in New Zealand, and we are a very small community, this country. We all know what a small village we live in. Inevitably, it will leak and people will be victimised. Despite them not having reoffended, despite them living good lives, they will be identified, they will be stigmatised. There's nothing surer that those incidents will occur. Some provisions of the legislation invite almost the publication. I'm particularly concerned, and always have been, about the provisions under Section 39. The Commissioner of Police is obliged to develop guidelines for the use and access to the register that must be used for specific named purposes by particular agencies. But all that gets blown out of the water by Section 39(3) that says guidelines may authorise the use of information contained in the register for a purpose other than the purpose for which the information was obtained, if an authorised person reasonably believes such use is necessary to prevent or reduce a threat to public safety. Nowhere in this document is that notion of a threat to public safety defined. There are no boundaries put around it. So it's a very broad, wide open invitation almost for people to use this information for purposes for which it has not been gathered. I think that's a very dangerous clause, and I think it's one which will undermine the best intentions of anyone who thought that it might ever remain a private, secure register, along, as I said, with the many thousands of people who will have access to it. The Minister noted she thought that, I think we're still talking about this figure of $146 million over 10 years that was in the regulatory impact statement as a projected cost. That's about $14.6 million a year at a time when we're seeing initiatives like these circles of support and accountability withdrawn for the sake of a few tens of thousands of dollars, where we're seeing treatment facilities in the community discontinued, where anywhere and everywhere one looks, organisations who are doing work in this field are crying out for cash, and there simply isn't any to be found. I think $146 million is a great deal of money when all evidence suggests, or rather there is no compelling evidence to suggest that this register will do any good at all. In reply to some additional questions put to them, the police came back with an approximate breakdown of what the cost would be just to them. They suggested a $5.08 million capital cost to set up this register, and then something like $54 million over 8 years. So 54 plus 5, that's a thick end of $60 million at a time when I'm hearing from local policemen on the beat in Northland that they are stretched beyond breaking point, where we know everywhere in New Zealand police are running on empty, despite their best efforts, despite their hard work, despite their efficiencies, they are doing their level best to perform in the absence of adequate resource, and suddenly $60 million goes away.
I'm going to call Derek Ball.